The skin. It's not just the part of the chicken that your mom told you to dump, but even the organ that permits your body to be protected from the environment. The skin's scientific name is integumentary system, and it's divided into multiple layers that have different functions, which goal is to keep the rest of the body nice and safe. The skin can be divided and described into three layers. These layers are, from the deepest one, the subcutaneous layers, the dermis and the epidermis. They have different functions and structures, and now I'm going to describe them. The subcutaneous layer is a greatly supplied tissue full of adiposity that contain fat, specifically triglycerides, which function as energy supply and as isothermal layer and have the function of sustain other tissues and blood vessels, needed to feed the subcutaneous layer as well as the upper layers. The next layer is the dermis, situated on the top of the subcutaneous layer. It's composed largely of extracellular material made of collagen fibers, elastic fibers, and other fibers, and are kept in place by a matrix of reticular fibers that form the ground substance. This structure of cells is kept in good condition by different kinds of cells whose job is to renew the older fibers, making new ones or restoring damaged ones. And there are even cells of the immunitary system that clean up old fibers and other junk. These cells are fibroblasts, which make collagen fibers, the neutrophils, the macrophages, the mast cells, and the eosinophils, which are immunitary system cells that work as cleaners and sentinels inside the dermis. The grainy fiber cells that works on the outside of blood vessels to feed the connective tissue and that produce histamine. This was just the base structure of the dermis, that is supplied with blood vessels that brings nutrients to the dermis and the epidermis. Other structures are the Mercan glands that expels sweat to help to keep a natural body temperature, that distinct from the apocrine glands because they secrete a different kind of sweat that function as a sexual aphrodisiac. There is nothing to argue. It works with animals and still works with some humans. Then there are the sebaceous glands that keep the hair hydrated and protected, and the hair follicle, which function is to make grow a body hair that extraflects outside of the body over the epidermis to function as a temperature control instrument and a body defense tool. It's connected to an erector hair muscle that makes erected hair to change its angle to make it more effective into body temperature control, and the intrinsic nerve net that permit the skin to communicate with the brain. Some of these nerves are the deep corpuscle of Pacini that detect the pressure changes, and the more superficial tactile corpuscle of Meissner, which are rapidly adapting mechanoreceptors. They are sensitive to shape and textural changes in exploratory and discriminatory touch. Their acute sensitivity provides the natural basis for reading Braille text. The last layer of the skin is called epidermis. It's the shallower layer of the skin, and its job is to keep the body under a resistant sheet of dead cells filled with keratin. But explained this way is not specific enough, so let's start from the beginning, explaining the epidermis from the bottom to the top. The epidermis lays on the basal membrane, a layer of proteins that permits the mature staminal cells of the epidermis to stay connected to the dermis, situated under heat, without needing to be supplied with blood vessels to get nutrients, because the proteins themselves work not only as the velcro of your sandals to keep one piece of it attached to the other, but as a semi-permeable membrane too, to permit the change of essential substances that permit the survival of the cells. The lower layer of the cells of the epidermis is a layer of mature staminal cells, which job is to make new cells to replace the older ones that get scratched away from the upper layer. These cells replicate without end, and the new cells that get created push out the older ones that get filled with keratin and start to change shape. On the same level of the seminal cells, there are other kinds of cells that are necessary to permit the communication between the brain and the external environment. These are the Merkel cells, connected to the neurons, whose job is to perceive pressure applied to the skin in a certain area. Then the melanocytes, whose job is to release melanin into the extracellular material to make possible to the cells to absorb it and get darker to be capable to shield the body from solar radiations. The new cells make the spinous layer, presenting the cells in a spacious structure full of extracellular material that permits the exchange of substances between the cells and the blood without the direct interaction of the two. In the spinous layer there is a special kind of cells called Langerhans cells, which job is to detect external particles and warn the immunitary system about them. On the top of the spinous layer there is the granular layer, which contains flattery cells filled largely with keratin and melanin. These cells have almost ended their life cycle and they are close to death, but to not inflame the area they have a string of active DNA that makes them commit apoptosis, a form of cellular death that triggers the end of chemical process in the cell. The next two layers are the stratum lucidum and the stratum corneum, which job is just the one of protection from rubbing. The cells of the layers are completely filled in keratin and they have a flake form, and the only difference between the two layers is the state of the cells, wherein the stratum corneum are completely drained of any water that was left inside. The stratum lucidum is situated just on the palms of both hands and feet, and on the fingertips. This was the anatomy of the skin, and there are really few things left to say. So I'm going to talk about what can damage the skin and what can hurt you and even kill you if something is wrong. The skin can get hundreds of diseases, but the only ones that I'm going to talk about are the more common ones, which are the easier ones to get. It's a long-term skin disease that occurs when hair follicles are clogged with dead skin cells and oil from the skin. Acne is characterized by areas of blackheads, whiteheads, pimples, and greasy skin, and may result in scarring. This disease is really hard to get rid of, and just some cases are treatable. It's the shedding of dead skin cells from the scalp. As skin cells die, a small amount of flanking is normal. About 487,000 cells per centimeter square gets released normally after detergent treatment. Some people, however, experience an unusually large amount of flanking, either chronically or as a result of certain triggers, up to 8,100 cells per centimeter square, which can also be accompanied by redness and irritation. Dandruff can get triggered by the water condition, stress, and bad caring of the head skin. is a type of cancer that develops from the melanocytes. It distinguishes from a nevus from the irregular shape, dimensions, and color shading. If a melanoma reaches the subcutaneous layer, or just the dermis, can make a cancerous cell go into the blood flow and make a tumor grow inside the body.
Freak! Don't you ever know it? Get out of here! Go away!
Thank God I'm blind. Ew, 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 ew. Oh.